Hi, I'm Gray and this is Hub Guitar. We're going to talk about how to play Blue Bossa. So for those of you who haven't heard of this tune, this is a very common first tune to learn if you're exploring the bossa nova style, but also if you're exploring the jazz style. So it can kind of be a gateway into either of those styles. This arrangement that we're going to do, however, is in the key of E minor. So Blue Bossa is a great tune because it's relatively short and it's only got 16 measures, so the melody is short and it doesn't have a whole lot of chords. So it's a really great kind of beginner-friendly tune, but it's usually played in C minor, and C minor on the guitar, that's going to call for a lot of these slightly more difficult chords that maybe won't be the best choice for a beginner. So today we're going to do an arrangement in E minor. So this song can be played basically by two or more players. So you need somebody to do the rhythm guitar to play the chords, and you need somebody to play the melody as well as do any improvised guitar solo bit. And of course, if you've got two players, there can be some interplay and those parts can be kind of swapped back and forth and things like that. So it's a fun tune to learn. This song follows a structure very common in instrumental music where the tune opens with a melody, sometimes called the head, and then there's a middle section in which the chords repeat, and now the individual players will take their own improvised solo, and then at the very end there's going to be a repeat of the melody, and maybe you can add some extra excitement or pizzazz to the melody at the end, so it has that kind of ABA structure to keep things neat and organized. To play the chords to this tune, we've got to learn 7 chords. They are E minor 7. So for that, you just pluck all of the strings and you brush across 6 open, 5th string, 2nd fret, open, 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 open. Then we've got A minor 7. So for A minor 7, we don't normally need the 6th string. And we've got open on the 5th string, 2, open, 1, open. Now we've got a chord with a long name, F sharp minor 7, flat 5, flat 13. Thankfully, it's a little bit easier to play than it is to pronounce. So we need the 2nd fret of the 6th string. We don't need anything on the 5th string. And then we need the open 4th string, 2nd fret of the 3rd string, open 2nd string, and we can throw in the open high E string if we like. Next we have the B7 chord. So we're only going to do the middle 4 strings for this one, and we need 2, 1, 2, open to play that chord. So because you're going to play this with your right hand plucking, it doesn't really matter that there are some wrong notes in there because you're not going to pluck them, hopefully. We've got 3 more chords that show up in the 3rd line of the tune. So they are G minors, that's 3rd fret, 5th string is empty, open 4th string, 3rd fret, 3rd fret. And you don't want to have the high E string in there probably, but you could. And then we've got C9, which is 3rd fret of the 5th string, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 3rd fret. And finally we've got F major 7. So you may have played this one before. This is 3, 2, 1 and open on strings 4, 3, 2 and 1. So in this one you actually don't pluck strings 5 or 6. So you want to get comfortable with those chord shapes. You want to press them up and down, focusing on the ones that you find difficult. A lot of people stumble on this weird F sharp chord. And so to do that, you want to play some chord push-ups. So you pluck the chord, lift up, pluck the chord, lift all the way up. Practice putting that chord into place rather than merely having it in place. There's kind of a big difference there. You don't want to keep your hand here and fidgeting around. You want to just throw it out and then start a new one. This is good chord practice. You're practicing the skill of reliably getting to that chord position and also playing it with a nice sound. There are many accompaniment patterns that can be used in the bossa nova style. For this lesson, we're going to learn the most basic and simple one. So we're going to use the E minor 7 chord for this. And then I'm going to pluck strings 6, 4, 3, 2 with my right hand. So you might be wondering why I'm actually pushing a note on the 5th string that's not even going to be plucked. Well, by one theory, maybe you will accidentally play it, and by another, maybe later on when your right hand gets more comfortable, you might start to include that note in your plucking pattern. For now though, we don't need it. We just need 6, 4, 3, 2. And normally the right hand fingers will have the index, middle, and ring finger on strings 4, 3, and 2 almost all of the time when you're playing a style like this. And then the bass, the root note or the bass, will switch around from being on the 6th string, and sometimes it will be on the 5th string. You'll find that all of the chords here follow that one of those two patterns, strings 6, 4, 3, 2 or 5, 4, 3, 2, with the exception of the F major 7 chord, in which you move them all down and you have strings 4, 3, 2, 1 all together. The basic bossa nova plucking pattern goes like this. We pluck all of the notes at once, and then we pluck the upper part of the chord, excluding the bass that would have been played with the thumb, and then we pluck the bass only, and then we pluck the upper part again. And the rhythm is like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4 is kind of just empty, or you let the chord continue to ring through 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Notice I switched to the middle 4 strings. I switched back to the previous pattern for the F sharp chord, middle 4 for the B7, and back to the original pattern for the E minor. For the G minor, it's the same as the E minor, for the right hand at least. Middle 4 for the C9, and this is the exception where I go to the top 4 strings. Now I go back to the first pattern, 6, 4, 3, 2, and then the middle 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then back to E minor. Like that. So practice that pattern really slowly. It's both upper, thumb, upper, and the rhythm is dot, 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 1, 2, 3, and. Practice that very slowly and it will become second nature to you. Once you can play the right hand pattern comfortably and you can quickly and reliably get to the chords, that's when you start practicing moving from one chord to the next. And that's a little bit of a different practice than as before. And we don't want to get stuck doing one chord, having a long pause as we fumble, and then moving to the next chord. It's kind of hard to get fast when you practice the chords that way. So I recommend, once you can play all the chords, you just kind of practice switching through them as fast as you can and try to get that faster. That's what's going to be the stimulus that forces your fretting hand to get up to speed. And then you can start to really apply that pattern with the right hand and do both of those things together. And then you'll be playing the rhythm track to Blue Bossa. The melody to Blue Bossa is relatively simple and easy to learn if you keep in mind a few things. First of all, we're going to play this in the 9th position, which means that generally speaking, each finger owns a fret. Index finger owns the 9th fret. Middle finger owns the 10th fret. Ring finger owns the 11th fret, and pinky finger owns the 12th fret. There are going to be exceptions to those rules. If a note is out of bounds, just like in baseball, the nearest player is going to run to grab it. So if I have a note on the 8th fret show up, my index finger is going to be responsible for that. But I'm not going to let that pull me out of position. I'm going to stretch out to it and then come back as soon as possible so that I don't get lost. You don't want to get lost, especially up here in the 9th fret of the guitar. It's easy to get lost when you're just starting out. The melody starts on the 9th fret of the 4th string, and then jumps up an octave to the 12th fret of the 2nd string. Walks down a whole step to the 10th fret of the same string, and then goes to the 12th fret of the 3rd string. Then to the 11th fret and the 9th fret. Then to the 12th fret of the 4th string and the 10th fret of the 4th string. So that's the first phrase. And it's punctuated by this little counter melody here going back up to the 12th fret of the 2nd string and the 10th fret of the 2nd string. So we've got... Just practice that sequence of notes irrespective of the rhythm. Here it is with the rhythm. So that's the first chunk of the melody. The second chunk of the melody couldn't be easier if you try to keep in mind that this is what's called a melodic sequence, which means that we repeat the same pattern, but we start from a different note. So if that whole chunk were a scale, now I'm starting it here. Of course I have to go one note lower because I started one note lower. And when I jump back up, I jump up to one note lower than the original note. So it's... And then the next half starts on the same melody note that ended the first half. That's the first 2 out of 4 chunks of the melody. Now, an interesting thing happens. The music momentarily starts to change key, which means that the chords suddenly have some notes that weren't heard before, and so the melody will also start to stretch away from the original sound. So don't worry, you're not learning it wrong. That's actually how it's supposed to sound. So you go on the 3rd string, 12, 10, 9, and then to the 12th fret of the 4th string, and 10th fret of the 4th string. Now we have to stretch out to the 8th fret of the 4th string, and then go to the 12th fret of the 5th string, 12th fret of the 4th string, back to the 12th fret of the 5th string, to the 10th fret of the 4th string. And you might notice that when I came back up to the 12th fret, I did tell you originally that the pinky owns the 12th fret, but then I myself actually cheated. Because I find that a lot easier to go back and forth between 2 notes like that with my 3rd finger. Doing that with my pinky will be a lot harder. But I could do it that way as well. The key is not to get lost, and if you do make an exception or cheat or change the fingering rule somehow, you just want to get back to that original finger position so that you have your point of reference again. And the last part of the melody is on the 10th fret of the 4th string, to the 9th fret, to the 12th fret, and it just sort of repeats that idea. If you're having trouble getting that melody in your head, you might want to listen to some various performances of Blue Bossa on the internet and get a sense for how the melody is supposed to sound. Once you can comfortably switch from note to note within this pattern, I think you'll find that the rhythm sort of comes to you automatically. And once you can play it at a reasonably fast pace, your next goal should be to play the melody along with the backing track. The key to practicing this stuff at home is to play with a backing track, because that's your only way of simulating the experience of playing with other people at home. Once we can play the melody and the chord accompaniment, the last thing that we're going to do is learn how to do a little bit of improvisation. Most beginning guitar players find this goal a little bit intimidating. After all, the melody and the chords sort of have an objective definition of what is correct and what is not correct. But when we start to venture into improvisation, you kind of wonder, am I improvising? Am I doing it right? Is this good? And it can make you feel a little bit self-conscious. But don't worry, we all start out that way. We start improvising with very little vocabulary to use, and just by taking some simple scales and just kind of pouring them out on top of a backing track and seeing what we like and seeing what sticks. So it is a creative process. We're going to improvise using a scale that fits the chords. At the beginning level of improvisation, we're usually going to use this same scale to improvise over every chord in this song. And that's somewhat true for Blue Bossa, although this tune does have a change of scale in the middle of the song, which I think makes it more interesting. In my experience, that doesn't really slow people down from learning to improvise over this tune. In fact, it kind of adds a little bit of excitement. To get started improvising over this tune, we're going to use the E minor pentatonic scale. That starts on the 12th fret of the big string, goes to the 15th fret. Next string is 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 15, and 12, 15. You want to play that up and down. And you want to play that a lot of times, not just once or twice. You're not just trying to generally get a sense of what the pattern is like. You're trying to physically master climbing up and down that scale. Later on in the tune, we go to G minor 9, C9, and F major 7. So that scale doesn't quite work with those chords. We're just going to slide down a whole step here to the 10th fret and repeat our minor pentatonic pattern. So it's the same pattern, it just starts on a different fret. So a lot of guitar learners are intimidated by the idea of improvising for the first time. While the melody and the chordal accompaniment sort of have a fixed point, a target that you can reach for, it's a little bit more vague to know what you're aiming for in your improvisation. Are you improvising? Does your improvisation sound good? I would suggest you try to put some of those thoughts to rest and just try to have a little bit of fun with it. The way we want to get started improvising is to take those scales and just make up some little 3-note patterns that you like this one. and then try playing it along with the backing track. Remember that for the G minor chord, you move your pattern down to the 10th fret. So you can play this little pattern over the first few chords, E minor, A minor 7, and so forth. And when you get to the G minor 9, you want to move it down. And then you can try repeating it. Maybe you don't like that. It's okay. Stop the backing track, come up with a new 3-note melody, and try again. Try to focus your improvisation on higher notes, like on the first, second, third, and fourth strings. That's because your chords are also going to have some relatively high notes in them. For example, the first chord, this E minor, has an open E, and that's going to collide with your scale, where you have an E on the 14th fret of the 4th string, and that's the same E. So generally, you don't want your melody to collide with your chords. You don't want the melody to drop beneath the range of the chords, at least not for long periods of time. Some of the notes might dip down in that low range, but you want to stay mostly on the higher notes that are available to you. So try it out. Learn these scales, practice them until you feel confident in your ability to play them, come up with some little 3-note melodies, and then play them along with a backing track. And most importantly, try to have fun.